Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the Back Office. My name is Mensing. My own name correctly, obviously tonight. It is definitely time for me to go to bed. It sounds like. And as always, joining me is our resident historian and coming soon guru for Backlot 605, Mr. Derrick Veurink. How are you doing this evening?
Pretty good, Brian. You?
I can't complain. It's been an interesting weekend, I think, for this weekend for the box office. You made a very interesting revelation that I wasn't even really paying attention to because there's only one thing really this week that I was really paying attention to. Is for the sake of a movie that is something that is a Marvel movie, and for the sake there's actually quite a bit that was actually going on this week for
Yes.
releases. Which is kind of unprecedented because usually, like what we had with Dune, is usually, something like a big tent pole, most studios are like, all right, let's just get out of the way of certain tent poles and whatnot because we know that we're going to just lose at the box office. And,
Yep.
that's kind of the little bit of a buck of the trend this week.
Yeah, because I mean, when Black Widow came out in July, that was the only movie that weekend. When
Hmm.
Shang-Chi came out on Labor Day weekend, that was the only movie coming out that weekend. But, since we're getting close to the end of the year and everybody wants to get their movies out there, there were a lot of movies. I saw 5 new releases in theaters this weekend. So I
Jeez.
kept incredibly busy, much busier than I thought. Because again, to your point, when a Marvel Studios movie comes about, everybody else typically gets out of the way, but not this year. Not this year.
They're
Or
like,
not this weekend, I should say.
we're getting to the end of the year. We got to try to get our Oscar bait out of there, even though half the stuff we're probably getting at the end of the year is definitely not Oscar worthy. Um,
True,
but
but
yeah, I guess,
take your chance.
right. I guess we'll see kind of how that goes there. So kind of going into that here, we do have our, woo, let's get the right thing up there. There we go. That's what happens when you don't start that right away. Is number one this week, of course, as expected to, is Eternals with $71 million in its first week. This is touted as the Academy Award winning Chloe Zhao film. You and I both got a chance to see this. Weirdly enough, it was very weird going to the Thursday preview showing of this film and sitting where I normally sit and seeing your seat completely vacant
I know.
because
I
you went to the later showing that night, but it was still a little weird for me that you weren't there.
I'm glad I had the option to take my seat if I wanted to, but Willy Wonka was playing that night at the state. I'm like, I love Willy Wonka. I've got to see that movie. It was the
Mhm.
4K restoration. The colors were awesome. It was just great to experience. So I took the late show, which is kind of ballsy, because it's a 9:40 p.m. showing
And a two and
of
a half
a
hour
well of
movie.
yep of a 2 hour 37-minute movie. So I was staying up all night, even though I had to go to work bright and early the next morning.
Hmm.
But that's just how it played out this particular weekend. I know of at least one movie we're going to together down the road here in a couple weeks, but for this weekend, that's just how it was.
Right, yeah. And like I said, I mean, $71 million for Eternals. My from what I've been seeing here, this is for the sake of the Phase 4 movies. This is the lowest opening, correct? Or
Yeah, but it's not that far off because Black Widow theatrically, not counting the Disney Plus, theatrically
mm-hmm.
Black Widow opened to 80 million. And
Okay,
then Shang-Chi, if you just look at the 3-day weekend, you don't take Labor Day into account,
true.
Shang-Chi did 75. So for
Okay.
this to open to 71, especially given its massive runtime, because if you take out
Mm-hmm.
Endgame, this is the next longest movie ever
Okay.
released in the MCU.
So
So
it's gonna have less showings.
yes, exactly. So by that measure, I think it's doing quite fine, or at least did fine this weekend.
Yeah.
I am going to be curious how the next several weekends fare for this movie, because
Mm-hmm.
certainly the word of mouth has been mixed. Right, at last I checked on Rotten Tomatoes, it was at 49%,
Mm-hmm.
which is by far the lowest that any MCU movie has had. And then I noted here it got a straight B cinema score, which is actually the lowest that any Marvel movie has ever gotten on there. Because Every other Marvel movie had an A plus or an A or an A minus, with the exception of the first Thor from 2011, and that had a B plus.
Even
So
Dark World, that is usually
Dark
critically
Dark
panned
World,
compared to the first Thor?
yeah, Dark World had an A minus.
I'm
And I know
intrigued.
when I posted all these scores Friday night, there was some comments saying, "How the heck did Thor: The Dark World get an A minus? That was like an F movie." So
I don't know about an F movie, but yes, I totally understand.
so certainly with a movie like this, no matter what, us Marvel fanboys are going to come out in droves,
Mhm,
on opening night or opening weekend or what have you. So
mhm.
that's the case. I'm going to be very curious how big the drops are going to be as we go into weekend 2, weekend 3. Just going to be very curious to see how that plays out. I don't think it's a coincidence that we're actually going to have the shortest ever gap between two MCU movies, because Spider Man No Way Home is coming out just 6 weeks after
Yep.
Eternals on December 17th. So I think that's kind of a little bit of preemptive scheduling, to the extent of, yeah, we realize you may not have liked this movie this much, but we've got a new Spidey movie coming out and we know you're going to love that. And that's going to be the big movie for the entire Christmas, New Year's holiday season. I'm, I think we're actually going to see the very first 100 million plus opening weekend since
With Spider-Man.
COVID with Spider Man.
It
Mark
it's
that
def
down right now.
it's definitely possible, and I definitely see that as a possibility. I kind granted, you're talking about that short schedule between Eternals and Spider-Man, and part of me thinks is, for the most part, that's not necessarily a Marvel-esque type of deal. I think that's more of Sony, because Sony has had so many movies that they've either offloaded or straight to to VOD or something like that. This is Spider-Man's like the only like major tentpole really that Sony has had all pretty much all year.
Well, I mean, they do have Ghostbusters in a couple weeks, and they have certainly had high hopes for that movie too.
Okay.
But certainly, Spider Man is one of their big ones. And again, Venom, Let There Be Carnage, got them $90 million
Oh yeah,
on
I
opening
forgot about
weekend.
Venom.
So they definitely are banking on their Spideyverse stuff. I mean,
Yeah.
we saw them put out the new Morbius trailer this past week as well. That's coming at the end of January. So they are just going to really start ramping up their little Spideyverse on the Sony side.
Oh, completely that aside, I think there's actually more to the my fan theory is there's a lot more going to that than they have let onto already though. But
Oh,
that
yes. Oh, yes.
partly that deals with the second end credit scene of Eternals, but that's a whole different conversation for a different day.
Mhm.
So on that, going in at number two, we have got Dune, as I stated. Dune in its third week at $7.62 million, taking a 51% drop. You and I probably both agree a lot of that percent drop, even though 51 is not that bad for a week three, but it's also a lot of people have watched it at the theater. They're probably watching it at home on HBO.
Yeah, I honestly expected this drop off to be a little bit deeper, because, again, last weekend, Dune still had all the IMAX and large format screens that went to
Hmm.
Eternals this weekend. Um, and granted, I would even say that, Eternals and Dune, they kind of have some tonal and mood similarities.
Sure.
So you could definitely see the Dune audience heading over to Eternals quite easily. But I think this just kind of goes to show how well Dune is actually resonating with audiences.
Hmm.
And again, as more and more people hear about the good word of mouth, as they hear about that Dune Part 2 is definitely coming in October of 2023, that's still bringing out some crowds, to be perfectly honest. Even
Yeah.
though it's still well in the heart of its HBO Max run, I did put the note in here that 31-day window does run out in 2 weeks on November 21st. But still, the fact that it's holding up in number two against Eternals, I'm happily fine with that.
That's yeah, I'd say that's a pretty good week three considering. I completely agree. There's very much a similar tone, a stacked cast kind of film
Yep.
sort of thing. The HBO Max thing working not necessarily against it, but it's definitely being a part of the equation and whatnot. So yeah, I agree. I mean, you know, at least it gives us something similar. You're definitely, I'm hoping you're not, if you're not, you're spending a day at the theaters if your double feature was Eternals and Dune. Um,
one, you were probably there all day,
Right.
but two,
Going
you
in
probably
open and
can't go
close.
wrong with that.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I would say, that'd be a it'd be a pretty visual, beautiful double feature.
Yep.
Time-wise, maybe not so much. Uh, Coming in at number 3 is, and I started looking at these numbers, I was very intrigued. The No Time to Die comes in at number 3, $16.18 million with only a 20% drop in its week 5. Because it was the 20% that's what caught my eye. It's kind of leaning into what you were talking about these last couple weeks in regards to the older crowd. It's kind of, keeping its place and whatnot. There's not much anything like it. Plus, you know, I don't it's not very I mean even pre-pandemic and whatnot, you never saw a movie barely like it was always like a 20s and 30s, dips in from week to week to week. I don't know if I've ever seen something like such a small percentage drop from week to week.
No, I mean, again, like we were talking about, the older audience, they're going to come out gradually for this, and certainly as long as theaters are still keeping this around, they
Mhm.
will keep showing up. Because again, we haven't had terribly much in terms of like big releases to usher stuff out, because Eternals was the only big thing this weekend. There's not much coming out these next couple of weeks, as we'll talk about in a little bit. So I think it's doing pretty fine, and we're closing in. Certainly, probably by this time next weekend, we'll probably have crossed 150 million total
Yeah.
on this movie, which is still pretty solid in the COVID times. One thing I did want to point out, we did get some breaking news yesterday afternoon, mid to late Saturday, when they officially announced that the movie is coming to premium VOD as a $20 rental this Tuesday, November 9th. So that ends up being only a 32-day window between
Mhm.
theatrical and VOD, when I originally expected it to be more along the lines of 45 days, if not more.
Yeah.
So I'll be very curious if that will put a dent in the hold next weekend. I mean,
Right. Yeah, especially because you figure, we're talking, Tuesday, so tomorrow is, that people be like, why go to the theater and spend 20, 30, $40 if I can go watch it at home for 20 bucks?
yeah. So I definitely expect that the movie will still be in the top five next
Mhm.
weekend, but again, we'll just have to see what that drop ends up being. So
Definitely, definitely. So coming in at the oh, there we go. How's that go happen? Venom coming in at number 4. Let There Be Carnage at $4.47 million. Only again a 22% drop. Again, a small percentage, which is very unusual. I mean, this almost kind of makes me feel between this and like No Time to Die is that people are getting more comfortable going out to the theater. So some of those ones that are not the new releases, people are going, okay, I'm willing to go to the theater to go see that now because it's going to be less busy than like say Marvels or Dune or Eternals and Dune.
yeah, and to be honest, I expected a much bigger drop on this movie
Yeah,
just because of the fact that Eternals was coming out. I
yeah.
was like, your target audience is going to be going to that movie. So I'm
Hmm.
kind of surprised how well it actually held. You and I were actually talking last week. We thought this movie was going to exit the top five completely,
Easily.
but there were some much bigger drops that happened in last week's top five to kind of allow us to keep in, because we talked about Halloween Kills, which was
Hmm.
number 2 last week. It actually dropped to number 7. It lost 73% from last week because, again,
It goes
once
right into what
Halloween
you
was
said.
over, yeah, once Halloween is over, people don't have interest in watching a Halloween movie. So that
Yeah.
fell out, because that fell out so hard. Also, because the My Hero Academia movie fell pretty hard. I think it dropped like 85%. That allowed for some movies to stick around in this top five. And Venom now, again, holding very well. As you can see here, it's on the cusp of $200 million, which I
Hmm.
believe will be only the second movie to do that so far, post COVID, since Shang-Chi. So it's doing very well for itself and kind of continuing to find that momentum, which I'm quite amazed by.
Yeah, I know it's a very interesting time. I agree. I mean, we like we said is we figured Venom would have been gone. Venom would have been past tense kind of thing. So this almost feels like again, it's kind of like the comic book people are like, I want to go to a comic book movie Eternals is maybe a little too busy for me right now, so at least I've got a backup more or less is kind of how I'm looking at it, to be honest.
Yeah, or maybe it's like I want to see a comic book movie, but this is a good hour plus shorter than Eternals, so
Just
I
a
can
little bit.
squeeze that in too. Who the heck knows?
Yeah,
Yeah, I'm just astonished by this placement because it was number 5 last week. It actually moved up in the
that's
process
true.
too. So
Yeah. So on that, coming in at number 5 is Ron's Gone Wrong. Um, which I get I love this here. And when I'm talking about small percentages, $3.6 million in its third week, only with a 4% drop. As long as I paid attention in my lifetime of watching numbers at the box office, stuff like that, I don't think in my 43 years I've ever seen a 4% drop.
I mean, there have been a number of movies that have done it, but it is very, very rare. And I think the reason why it did this makes perfect sense because last week, Ron's Gone Wrong had like a 50% drop from opening weekend. It was at number 8.
Mhm.
Um, and I think the reason why it came back is because, again, this is a family aimed movie. Last weekend, families were mostly focused with trick or treating and whatever
True.
else they were doing celebrating Halloween. But now the Halloween's over, and families are like, well, if we're going to go to the theater, and again, if we're not interested in spending the 2 hours and 37 minutes to watch Eternals, what's the most available family movie going option? And Ron's Gone Wrong was definitely that. So I think that's why it was able to kind of eke its way back up into the top 5 this weekend.
Yeah, definitely. This is the one of all of so far that has just intrigued me the most. But I mean, you make a very viable conclusion as to why that would have happened.
Yeah.
So so that is the top 5 as I keep going through things here. So top 5 recap, we have Eternals at $71 million taking number 1. Dune is number 2 at 7.62 million. No Time to Die, number 3 is 6.18 million. Venom, Let There Be Carnage takes number 4 at 4.47. It really likes that 4 right now. And Ron's Gone Wrong takes 5 at $3.6 million. Now, you did come up with a few little miscellaneouses here this week here.
Yeah.
Uh,
I mean, long story short, there was a lot that was going on at the box office, especially here in town because we had a number of additional releases. So I did want to point them out real quick.
mhm.
At number 6 was Wes Anderson's The French Dispatch, which finally made it to Sioux Falls this weekend.
Took us what,
Right now,
2 weeks, 3 weeks?
this is weekend 3 for the
Yeah.
movie. It added 400 theaters this weekend. It's now up to 1,200 theaters nationwide. It's at number 6. This is the highest it's been in the box office to date. It's probably never going to get into the top 5, but nonetheless, it's doing
Weirder
pretty
things
well.
have happened.
That's true. That's true. Um, so anyway, it made 2.6 billion. It's at 8.5 billion dollars total, so it's doing fine. Number 7, Halloween Kills. As I noted, it had a 73% drop, so it went from second last week to seventh this week. It made 2.35 million. Number 8 is a brand new opening, which is Spencer, the movie starring Kristen Stewart as Princess Diana. That
Mhm.
opened in just under 1,000 theaters. It made $2.1 million, which is fine for what's essentially an art house movie, getting a semi nationwide release right off the
Mhm.
bat. And then just outside the rungs of the top 10, this is an interesting little bit. So Netflix has decided to give a theatrical release to one of their big blockbusters. In this case, it's Red Notice, the Dwayne Johnson, Ryan Reynolds, Gal Gadot action comedy team up. So they put this movie out in 750 theaters this weekend. And the fun part about this is, much unlike what they do on the streaming side, Netflix doesn't give any official numbers for how its movies do at the box office.
Sure.
Uh, the folks at Deadline.com, where I read their box office analysis, they guesstimated that the movie made somewhere between $1.25 and $1.5 million this weekend, as it has a 1 week advance run in theaters prior to it starting its streaming run on November 12th.
Yeah, and I find it fascinating that we've got Spencer and Red Notice, both less within 1,000 theaters. Our town is not known for getting these smaller, low number theater releases and whatnot. And the fact that we got both of these is kind of surprising to me, to be honest.
Yeah, and I mean, this is part of what I would consider kind of the shifting trends of movie releases. I've certainly, at least with the limited releases that we've been seeing, we've been getting a lot of them sooner than
Hmm.
expected, and I think they're trying to get a bigger bang for their buck quicker. Especially now that we have these much more narrower theatrical to VOD windows, where they might be like
Right.
3 weeks or 30 days. There's a lot less time to make your bucks theatrically than it was pre-COVID. So I think that just puts the onus on the studios and distributors to put their movies out in as many theaters as possible sooner. So that's why I think we're getting a lot of these nowadays.
Yeah. Well, and hopefully maybe they're just realizing our little town isn't so little anymore and that we're going to get some of these things that we weren't getting before, because that would be great.
Yeah,
Think of how many times you and I have been like, "Oh, we don't get to see that movie until it comes to home video because, we don't get it. We're not cool enough."
yeah.
So,
So
yeah,
hopefully, fingers crossed.
fingers crossed. That's why we have things like the state that's given us all the art house and the smaller ones that we would never see otherwise.
Yeah, there's actually a fun fact with that. So this weekend, the state had the beta test, the Jim Cummings movie. The state was one of only 25 theaters nationwide showing that movie, and that made, I think, it was like $18,000 total across those theaters. So
Nice.
it was kind of nice to have a super limited release for once, because we definitely haven't gotten those. So
No, no. I mean, yeah, like in this instance here, 750 theaters or just under 1,000 theaters. Like for us to get something like that is more. I can picture that, but you to tell me that we got the beta test and it was in one of 25 theaters in the entire
yep.
nation tells me go. Who at the state had to do what to get that movie? Um, and clearly Jim Cummings likes you because he stole your photo.
Yeah, yeah. I definitely do not hold a grudge against him whatsoever.
You
So
don't? You're not asking for reciprocity?
we got his
Pay
movie in
me.
theaters. That's pretty awesome enough. So I'm
Right.
happy.
All right. Well, that has been the box office for this week. Let us know what you thought. Is there anything that you went to go see? Like not like Eternals, Dune. I myself think, and I know I liked Eternals more than you did and whatnot. Do I think it has its problems? Yes. However, I think it's also getting a lot more hate than it's deserving.
Sure.
So definitely those. I think everybody should go check out Eternals, especially on the big screen, because whether you love or hate it for the sake of the story, it is absolutely gorgeous and should be seen on a big screen.
It
Um,
has
on
a
a tech
very epic quality to it. So
on a technical level, it's worth it. Um, in regards to that, be sure to check us out on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Letterbox HQ. We're all at Backlot 605. Be sure to follow our podcast. You can find it where all podcasts are found, such as Apple, Spotify, Google, Stitcher, Amazon, and obviously YouTube here. And be sure to check us out on Patreon, Backlot 605 there. Join Patreon for $5 a month. You get our bonus episodes. We do one every single week. We definitely want to be able to give you guys more content and support the channel and everything that we do. Derek, take it away.
yeah, I mean, and again, on the Patreon, you'll hear the guys talk about a number of the movies we just discussed, including Venom and No Time to Die and Halloween Kills and Dune. And you guys will definitely be doing an episode on Eternals here in the next week or so.
Hmm.
So I'll be very curious to see how you guys discuss that movie. So,
Yes, we just got done with Last Night in Soho, and it's
yep.
luckily for me, I had Sam's backing because Casey was not very nice, and he needs to take it back.
I am definitely on you and Sam's side on that movie. I've seen it twice now. The second in a completely empty theater, because it has not been getting the love that it deserved. So, um,
Agreed. It definitely is not getting the love that it deserves.
yes. And then, of course, also come down to backlog605.com for more things, including my weekly Coming Soon article, including this week, where we'll discuss the streaming release of the aforementioned Red Notice, as well as the theatrical debut of Clifford the Big Red Dog, the big movie that we'll be discussing on next week's box office show. So check that out.
And that one's getting a dual release too, right?
That is correct. It opens Wednesday in theaters, and it will also be on Paramount Plus. So it's the exact same deal that Paramount did for the Paw Patrol movie.
Yeah, so that means, yay, Brian gets to watch Clifford the Big Red Dog.
It'll be fine. I mean, it's John Cleese
It-
shows up for a scene. Keenan Thompson shows up. Tony Hale
It
shows
looks
up.
cute. It looks cute. I will give it that. I mean, for a kids movie for being Clifford the Red Dog, I won't lie. It looks cute. I kind of hope my kids dig it, but
That could
I
be the
guess
movie
we'll
they
see.
rewatch endlessly while you wait for Space Jam 2 to show up again.
Oh my god, I just want Space Jam 2 to be back on HBO so they will leave me alone. On that, I appreciate everybody here. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Find us out. Leave us a review wherever you listen to podcasts. Check us out on Patreon and all that fun stuff. Until next time, we will see you here next week.
Have a good night.
Bye.